Hey there, welcome. All right, welcome to the Grass Gets Greener Live. I'm going to be joined today by Dr. Susanne Babbel. We're going to be discussing her new book, Heal the Body, Heal the Mind, a Somatic Approach to Moving Beyond Trauma. And I'm just really excited to have you guys here. One sec here. Let's see. All right, we got Dr. Babbel on. I'll bring you on in just a sec, Dr. Babbel. So I'm just excited to have you here. This is the first ever, live edition of The Grass Gets Greener, and just really excited for it, and we have a great topic for you today. And for those of you tuning in who may not be familiar with me, I am Melissa Wilson, and I'm the host of the Grass Gets Greener podcast. I have been doing that for the past 4 years, where I interview survivors of childhood trauma and abuse who are doing well today, and they come on and share their stories of what they've been through and how they've been affected by that and what has helped them to get to where they are now, in an effort to provide hope and inspiration for those who are still struggling and to let them know that things can get better. And so super excited. And I had this idea to do some type of live show. I wanted to do something like this, and where I would interview various experts or people who had something to share when it comes to past trauma and abuse, that are not necessarily a fit for for what I'm doing with the podcast, but wanted to interview them to to share their knowledge with you. And a few years ago, I interviewed Dr. Babbel for the Bullying Survivors Virtual Summit, and we reconnected recently. And she was telling me about her book, and I thought it would be, a great opportunity to do this type of interview with her. And so here we are today. We're going to be doing this live, and hopefully everything will go smoothly. That's the first time I will be bringing someone on to do one of these with me. So let's hope that the tech cooperates with us. So I'm going to go ahead and try to bring Dr. Babbel on right now. Let's see here. And get started. So just take a minute and give other people an opportunity to hop on as well and join us. There we go.
Yay, it worked.
It's working.
It's my first time too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, how about you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Wonderful. Hi, Melissa.
Great.
And hi, everyone else.
Yes. So, well, I'm excited to have you here. Thanks for being my first guest on the Grass Gets Greener Live.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's my first time on Facebook Live too, so.
There you go. Great. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. How about you?
Doing good, yeah. Just been excited for this.
Me too.
So, I've done interviews on the podcast for 4 years. So this is my first time doing one live and on video. So.
Yeah, you're more experienced with interviews. My interviews are just usually written, not live. So you're more experienced.
Well, I'm sure you'll do great. And we talked a few years ago, and you provided some great information back then. So definitely looking forward to having you share with us again here today.
Me too.
So for anyone checking this out, just want to let you know a little bit about Dr. Babbel before we get started. So Dr. Babbel is a licensed psychotherapist practicing with a trauma specialty in her private practice in San Francisco, California. She's a member of the California Association for Marriage and Family Therapists, as well as the United States Association for Body Psychotherapy and European Association for Body Psychotherapy. She's been a contributing author for nearly a decade to the Psychology Today online blog. Dr. Babbel also writes for magazines and newspapers, appears on radio shows, creates CDs for healing, and co-taught the UC Davis Extension online course on trauma bonding. Dr. Babbel's mission is not only to bring awareness to what trauma is, but also to help people with innovative techniques to fight trauma symptoms. So definitely excited to talk with you today on this topic, and I think this is going to be really informative for those tuning in.
Thanks for the
So
intro.
so I'd like to start out by just having you share, what inspired you to write your book.
Yeah, you know what inspired me is that my clients actually inspired me because every time they come into my office, they have trauma symptoms, but they don't know that they have trauma. And so that was my first reason for writing the book, because a lot of people don't understand trauma. And when they say, "Oh, can you recommend a book?" There are lots of books on trauma, but most of them are for professionals. And so usually my clients felt overwhelmed, and then they felt when they would read the books and they said, "Oh, it's for clinicians or professionals. I don't understand it." And so I really wanted to write a book that people understand. So I voted for the layperson rather than for the professionals. But I also use professional vocabulary because it's really important, I feel, because then people have the chance to look up the terms and research more and go beyond this book. So it's a beginning if somebody hasn't read anything about trauma and doesn't understand it. And then also for people to know that to know what trauma is and what the symptoms are, what they can do, what areas in their lives are impacted by trauma. So yeah, really, my clients were my first inspiration. I also had my own trauma um, many years ago and had my own healing journey. And the verbal therapy was very important, and it helped me a lot, but it wasn't the final puzzle piece for me. So and so the same for my clients, because during trauma, we will talk more about it. Is that your nervous system gets impacted, and that's a different part of the brain than the logical mind. And so it's when I did my own healing journey and also help other people, it's really important to include the nervous system. And so I wanted to write a book where people become aware of that verbal therapy by itself is not enough. It's one part of the puzzle, but not the whole. It's not complete.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. So who would you say can benefit most from reading this book?
You know, really everyone who's experienced trauma, we always think like, oh, it's only that type of trauma or that type of trauma, but really anyone who's experienced trauma, because everyone is unique. Everyone has a unique response to trauma, but then there's also commonalities. And one of the common impact of trauma is your nervous system, and everyone will feel very similar symptoms. So like the overwhelm or avoiding, the hypervigilance, the memories, the loss of memories, the concentration, and there's a whole list in the book as well. There's so many that I can't list them all, but they're all they're all those are all very similar on this or the same. And then everyone has a unique response, of course. But so really it is everyone who has experienced trauma. So from bullying, like what you talk a lot about, and I was bullied as well, and that's also why I was so passionate to be on your podcast. I was bullied when I was young, and anyone, even there's a lot in the media about sexual abuse and abuse, definitely. And people now, we've here in California had the fires. Anyone who's just recently gone through the fire, or anyone, even if it's 20 years ago, they still might have trauma symptoms, because especially if they haven't addressed it. So really anyone who has experienced something traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah, I know in the book, I mean, you list just all the different types of traumas that someone can experience, and there are just so many
There's so
things,
many, right?
right?
Yes, and
I think
yeah,
also, go ahead.
no, you go. It's okay.
I was gonna say, I think, the book is also helpful for, someone who is trying to support someone who's, been through something. It's
Yeah,
gonna give them a better understanding of what they've gone through, right?
yeah, you're so right. Because there are also people that take care of someone, or they're with someone, a partner, or spouse or family members, they don't understand what's going on with their loved ones that went through something and went through a traumatic situation, and because the logical mind gets shut down, and so it's really good for them to have some guidelines and understand what's going on, so they don't, because people who've had trauma, they often appear crazy at times, but they really aren't. It's really the symptoms, it's not the person. And so it's good to understand that, even for people who are partners, spouses, and loved ones.
Absolutely. So I know that you talk about how, trauma and PTSD are largely unknown or misunderstood. So tell us, what is it about trauma that, can lead someone to experiencing PTSD?
Yeah, really, PTSD means really if they've had the symptoms more than a certain time. So if it's more than a month, so everyone has trauma symptoms in the beginning, flashbacks of avoiding, like if you've been in the fire, then you avoid certain areas, or you have certain triggers that, like the smoke will trigger you, or any smell of the smoke, just as an example. But if the symptoms are that if they are longer than 1 month, that's what they call it PTSD. Is that what you want? That's what you meant with your question?
Yeah, well, so that gives us kind of a definition of it, but are there certain things that factor into someone having those symptoms last longer than when that, it initially happens?
Yeah, so there's a lot of theories about it, but one is that it depends on what they call in psychology the resources. So let's say an older woman can't run as fast as a young person. So an older person might experience experience the trauma as more traumatic, as someone who can run away from the fire and get shelter. For example, the Bessel van der Kolk, he's a researcher and about trauma. He said that people who escaped from the 9/11, a lot of those people had less PTSD than Hurricane Katrina, because Hurricane Katrina, they couldn't go home. And for the 9/11, it happened in their offices. So they had a lot of them, so they could go home. Not everyone, but a lot of people that could go home had less PTSD because they had a safe place to go to. So it depends on how on the resources that somebody had. Were you able to go home, or what's the age? Were you already sick? Were you already having some trauma? So it really depends on your circumstances at the time. And so that's why it's so hard. You can't really say the event is causing the trauma, although in a way you can, but really it depends on what resources you have at the time as well. Because otherwise, the same person, if two people are in the same natural disaster, or in the same situation, it's not a given that both of them experience PTSD. And why is that? Because one might have more resources than the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's
So, yeah,
why,
it's interesting. There are just
yeah,
a
not
lot of
really the
factors
event
involved.
then. Yeah, there's so many things that factor in, right?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And you're welcome to bring in the bullying part too. I don't know if you want to bring that in, or if you want me to stay more as with trauma as a general theme, or if you want me to address the bullying. Let me know if you want more details.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, what we're talking about is good.
Good.
Keeping it general is fine. Um, so I know that, your book focuses on, the mind-body connection, and how, when trauma occurs, the logical mind is hijacked, as you say,
Yeah.
and the physiology takes over to protect us. And I know, you've touched upon this a little bit so far, but can you explain to us, what's going on there and the role that, the nervous system is playing in our reaction to trauma.
Yeah, I find this is the most important one, super important. So when there's a traumatic situation, a bullying or the fire or abuse or anything like that, our body goes into fight, fight, freeze. And that is a different part of the brain than our logical mind. So that one, the fight, flight, freeze is connected to our brain that's called the amygdala. And the amygdala then gives information to our nervous system to go into fight, flight, freeze. And why? So I give, for example, a car accident, right? You can't go and so there's a car accident. You can't say, oh, let me see if I cover my head, or if I run away, or if I swirl around, or you can't start thinking about it because it was in seconds. You have to protect your body. And that applies to every traumatic situation. So immediately the body goes into, okay, let me see what I can do within a split second of protecting my body, because that's how you can die the fastest, is first your body, right? And so it goes into, so the nervous system then goes into the fight is fighting it off or protecting your body, and the flight is running away, and then the freeze is really the last. None of those work, and those people have often more PTSD than any other, the people who had to go into freeze. So people couldn't fight or they couldn't run away. Those are usually end up with PTSD as well, more so than the other ones. And so when you go and so then the freeze, usually you don't feel any pain. It's like the shock reaction. You can't really move. And so that is the first reaction. And all that happens, what happens then is we scan our environment. And how do we scan our environment is through sensation. So what we see, what we hear, what we feel, and so on. All our senses are then activated. And that is the only way, actually, to reverse the PTSD, to reverse the trauma. It's the language of the sensations. It's the access sensations, because that's how it was originally scanned and then basically saved as a program in your body. And so now to uncode, to decode it again, you can only access that part of the brain through sensations again. And that's probably really hard to understand because it's new for a lot of people, but I'm wondering if that brings up any questions for you.
Yeah, so you're saying, we have to reprogram our brains essentially.
Right.
And we have to use sensations to do that. So what might that look like, or would be an example of a particular treatment?
So when you're in therapy and want to access the nervous system, it only speaks the language of sensation. So when I say, so one example is, so I will say, how does it feel in your body, or what does your body tell you about this event, or tell you right now? And so then you might say, oh, I feel constricted. I feel constricted in my heart, or I feel constricted in my back. I feel warmth. I feel, those are all sensations, and we are not used to talking that way. Sometimes maybe in yoga class or when we get a massage, the massage therapist might say, what does that feel like? And then we describe sensations, but we are only used to describe emotions usually, but not sensations. But that's the only way you can access the nervous system and go from, so what they say, the nervous system goes into a sympathetic mode, which is the survival mode. and that's a fight, flight, freeze. And the relaxed mode, they call it parasympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic mode, and that's a relaxed mode. And both access organs in your body, both access your nervous system, but one says to relax and one says go in survival mode. And so you want to find a way that you tell your nervous system, you know what, they are stuck in the survival mode. So now you need to tell the nervous system, you know what, the trauma is over. You can go into now a relaxed mode, but it won't know that until you speak in the language that it knows. It's so hard to explain sometimes, but I hope it's there's more clarity now.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so like, so what do we do exactly? Like, so let's say like we're being triggered, right? And we're experiencing some sensation, or we're feeling anxious, or we have that tightness in our chest or something. And then what can we do to kind of help ourselves go into that relaxation mode?
Yeah, it's hard, because we are to work with the nervous system. I was trained by Peter Levine, who writes a lot about this, and so I write a lot about his theory in my book, but also use other theories. Really, I took the training. It took 3 years, and then I assisted another 2, so it's 5 years. So it's really hard to like yes, a lot you can do, and in my book I have 23 exercises that you can do, but I just want to say that doesn't replace someone who learns this for 3 years on how to do, but there's a lot you can do to help to make more progress and to make this progress faster. But it can't replace that. That would be nice. It's like replacing a doctor. And we can go to medical school and all, but it's I just want to make sure that we can't replace someone who studied this. So it's really important sometimes to go to someone. But what you can do is you can work with your nervous system to calm it down. So anything with sensation will calm it down. So if you're someone who likes massages, that's good. If you're someone likes listening to music, because listening is also one. Breathing exercises. Breathing is really important and can also soothe the nervous system. So if you can breathe, like the breathing exercise in 3 increments, like you breathe in 3, you hold 3, and you breathe out 3. So, for example, you can also, Eugene Gendlin wrote a book that's called Focusing, and I mentioned that in my book as well, and that is paying attention to the sensation. So usually we want to get away from the sensation, but we actually, if we stay with it, you will see that it actually dissipates. And it dissipates fairly quickly sometimes. And so if you're courageous enough to stay with the uncomfortable feeling and describe it to yourself and say like, oh, right now I feel a fluttering in my chest, and you become the observer. Describe in detail the sensation and stay with it. And after 10 to 20 minutes, like when you ask yourself, what do I sense right now? Oh, now it's moving. Now it's going this direction. You often, it will dissipate. But it takes a lot, sometimes you can also learn it with a practitioner who shows you how to do it, and then you can keep practicing it at home. But there are some exercises in the book that you can also do. And, they go into detail. So if you go and look at the books, and you will see. But paying attention to your sensations and doing something that has to do with sensations. So for example, anything also with there's a nerve that's called the vagus nerve that goes from your face all the way to your gut, and that is also connected to your nervous system. And so anything with your face, facial expressions or face, like gargling, for example. I know when you're nervous or something like that, you don't think this will help, but actually it will help to gargle or chew gum, make facial expressions, breathing. That also has to do with the with the vagus nerve. So splashing water on your face. You can try different things, but all those, yoga, all those can help to help the nervous system go into a relaxed mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. No, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So, we know that, trauma affects all areas of our lives. And I know you wanted to talk in particular about how trauma impacts work and relationships. And what I think is interesting is, how we can be impacted in these areas and not fully, be aware of it. And so, can you share with us, what it might look like when trauma is impacting our work, for instance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, again, that's a chapter in my book. So there, when we go into fight, flight, freeze, it can actually we can get stuck in that mode. And so what that will look like, for example, in our career, when we are in flight mode, we might always want to leave a certain job. And those are the ones that change every year, they change their jobs. They find
Mm-hmm.
something, either one that the fight mode is creating drama. So somebody will always have some kind of drama at work. And you see, like, why is this person creating all this drama? And I wish I could read this. Oh, great. great, great conversation about trauma. I like it. Thank you.
Kimberly?
Yes. So, in terms of work, so somebody who's in fight mode, they will create drama, and because it creates adrenaline, and the adrenaline is part of that gets you into fight, flight, freeze, and that's part of the nervous system that's stuck in trauma mode. So we always want to go and create adrenaline. I know it's like it's all about the nervous system. And so once you understand that more, you understand why you're reacting that way. But so at work, you want to create more adrenaline by creating drama. If you are in a flight, stuck in flight mode, you always want to change jobs and you don't know why. You always find a reason to move on, and
Mm-hmm.
or you feel easily overwhelmed, and that's usually the freeze. And so at work, you just feel like, somebody is asking you something to do, and all of a sudden you feel overwhelmed and you can't do anything. So you freeze. Thanks. I keep reading the note, so it's nice to see that.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to do this live. I think it's great,
Yeah, it's great. And so
some
also it
interaction.
can affect your bank account,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're in fight mode, and also usually we look for authority when we've had a trauma, because we don't trust a set situation anymore. A lot of us want to then have somebody who tells us what to do, but also because the logical mind is shut down or doesn't work properly all the time. And so we can't rely on it, right? We kind of learn to say, oh, okay, my logical mind is on and off, on and off. And so then we look for authority to tell us what to do, right? And we need to trust other people, whatever they say. But so that's also one trauma reaction we could have. It's like we always feel insecure about what we should do or how to do it, because the logical mind is so unreliable.
Mm-hmm. And and I think, that's why it's so interesting, because someone might not be making those connections,
No, I know, not at all. They might not,
But
yeah.
yeah.
And it might be so long ago that they think, oh, it's so long ago. It was 5 years ago. It was 10 years ago. It was 20 years ago. But if you never address the nervous system, it will still be in survival mode, and you still react as if you are in the traumatic situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know, when it comes to relationships, I mean, that can be tricky because
Yeah.
oftentimes a trauma survivor hasn't experienced a healthy relationship, or even if they have, trauma can still affect existing healthy relationships. And so, can you share with us, ways in which relationships might be affected by trauma?
Yeah. relationships, and especially there's also some in relationships that's very tricky, especially if you experienced trauma when you were little, and especially when you experienced trauma with someone that you loved or trusted, because it's a bond between the love that someone shared, for example, with a parent or a relative or authority like a teacher or someone they trusted and loved. And so if the trauma happened, like an abuse or with a loved one, is that bond now can be what is stored as that's not safe. And so then no relationship feels safe, because another thing happens with the brain that's called amygdala is that it stores everything. It stores the emotions. So as we experienced love when we were little or with a loved one, it can be even later, and if you had an abusive relationship, then that love, now that when you feel love again, it says, oh, let me see. It goes into the amygdala where it experienced love before, and it says, oh, I experienced this before, be careful. It's connected, it links to the trauma. That's my cat. She wants to be on it. She has something to say too. So so then so anything that is around the love then can be triggering. And so also touch can, as a sensation of touch, can also evoke the memories that someone had that triggers the same feeling. So that's when something happens with the bond. They also call that attachment when we were younger. The attachment is the bond between a loved one and the child. And so if we couldn't trust that, then it's really hard to trust as an adult. But then there's also, if you've experienced other traumas, it's really hard because somebody again might be easily overwhelmed, or sometimes the logical mind is not reliable, and so it's just can be tricky in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
There's one more thing that I want to say is that when trauma happens, and no matter at what age, and when we are stuck in the trauma mode, in the survival mode, is that our nervous system creates stress hormones, and one of them is called cortisol. And cortisol disconnects us. So in a relationship, we then feel disconnected, and it doesn't have anything to do with the partner. But all of a sudden, the partner who experienced trauma is kind of distant, and you think it's the relationship, but it isn't. The person who has experienced trauma might even think they're not in love anymore. But really, it's the cortisol that makes you feel disconnected. I've seen that even with new moms when their birth was traumatic, or if they experience something, they might not, they say, I don't know if I love my children. It sounds horrible, right? But they do. It's just that the cortisol makes you feel like you don't anymore. You're not connected. So what you can do in a relationship is to create oxytocin. I know it's a lot of vocabulary, and so hang in there with me, but those are the things that over time, when you read it again and again, you will learn. And then the good part is that you can look it up. But there's a love hormone, and the love hormone is called oxytocin, and it counteracts the stress hormone. And the stress hormone that disconnects you, now you can create a hormone that connects you. And that's you have to find out what that is for you. But sometimes it's touch. If touch is triggering, then you can't use that. It's actually appreciation. So I always tell couples to, at night, to say 2 or 3 things that you appreciate about each other. And guess what? That creates a hormone that connects you. It's a simple one, but so there are lots of simple ways that I mentioned in my chapter on relationships that you can actually do, that anyone can do to counteract the disconnecting hormone.
That's great. Yeah. And I know that you have a chapter in your book on creating a trauma resilient relationship. Um, and maybe these are the strategies you've been talking about right here, but what is one strategy that we can leave with viewers today that they can begin implementing right away to build healthier relationships?
Yeah, right away, like I said, right away, appreciate each other. We always think that's so easy, but all the couples that I see, they never do it. It's really rare.
Yeah.
It's like, we find something that's not right. I was like, why is he doing that? Why is she doing that? Why is she doing that? But it's rare that we say, I really appreciate that about you. You really like, even if it's every day the same, right? We always think, well, I can't always use the same one. Yes, you can. If that person every day does something that you appreciate, you can appreciate the same gesture every day. So that one is one. Also, talk about what's important is to learn the triggers. What does trigger the other person, And is is a certain touch? Is it certain words? Is it certain gestures? I have one woman who feels whenever her husband is coming up too fast behind her, that triggers her. So if he learns that that's a trigger, maybe he then can be mindful and make sure that he says something when he comes from like maybe the other room and says, make some noise already, or you find something so that that it's important to talk about the triggers and not to be embarrassed about it. With a right practitioner, you can clear a lot of triggers, but in the meantime, it's important for the other person to know what they are. There can be even sounds, but then at least the partner can be of support rather than being targeted or go into what's going on and being overwhelmed. And so learn about the triggers and learn about trauma, even the partner.
Yeah, it sounds like just so important to have that communication with them, and just let them know what's going on with you and what you're noticing about, what they're doing that might be triggering you, so that, maybe they can make some changes and you don't have to be triggered in that way anymore.
Yeah, and sometimes the trauma survivor might not be aware that they're triggered, and so then the partner then can say, I notice that whenever I say this, like I used to have it with when I was younger, I used to have a partner that likes to speak with his hands, like big gestures, and that triggered me. Not anymore, luckily, but that's when I was triggered, and so I had to tell him that, when you do that, it's not you, but I get triggered, and I had to work on the triggers. But meanwhile, maybe just know that I react that way, or work with me, that maybe the gestures can maybe mean not as big for right now, or you work around it as a couple. You're a team. Work as a team rather than seeing it against you, and never think it's like, oh, it's so long ago, you shouldn't have it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Babbel, I think this has been great, and hopefully, it's been informative for those tuning in. I wanted to give you an opportunity. I know that you have a course coming out soon, right? Your Fear of Success course. So just wanted to give you an opportunity to share with us about that and who it's for.
You're sweet. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's on Daily Om, and they have courses for self-help courses, but also yoga and things like that. And they're working on the title right now, but originally it was called Fear of Success. And it's an 8-week course. And so it should come very soon. So keep looking at their site. what it is that we can fear, that excitement can be interpreted as fear, because when we are excited, that's why it's called fear of success, because success can bring excitement. But when we've had trauma, the excitement is very similar to fear in the way that the heart beats faster, that there's adrenaline rush, and so on. And so then the nervous system says, oh, just again, hello, I recognize the adrenaline. That must be, I must be going into fight, flight, freeze right now. No, you actually have to go into excitement, but it doesn't go that path, so
Mm-hmm.
it's an 8-week course, and it can be any, actually, for any it doesn't say that it's for trauma, but it's for any person who've had trauma. It's really nice. And then for each week I do a kind of a meditation or hypnotherapy a little bit, or like more of a meditation with each week. And so so that the body doesn't go into fear, but goes into excitement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, fear and excitement are so closely related, and it's hard to distinguish them sometimes. You think
Yeah,
something that's good for you and exciting, can seem dangerous because it triggers that fear response.
yeah, because it says, oh, there's adrenaline. Oh, okay, I recognized before. I must be going into fight, flight, freeze. So, and then somebody I shared. Oh, that's nice. Somebody shared this interview on her page. Thank you.
So, we'll be wrapping up here, and I know we have a couple people tuning in. So, if there are any questions, let us know. We're happy to do a quick Q&A. But any final words of encouragement you'd like to leave the viewers with today? For anyone who might be in their healing journey right now.
Yeah, one thing I want to say is I know whatever I said today is overwhelming in the beginning, and especially for trauma survivors, because the logical mind is not always fully there, and so sometimes this is hard. So don't get discouraged. Read the book one page by page, and just take one step at a time, small steps, and just also know that most people can beat PTSD. Most people can get better. And actually most people turn it around. And you know, just keep moving forward one step at a time, but don't put pressure on yourself. A lot of people say, well, how long does it take? And just know that it takes whatever your psyche needs. It has its own pace. And just don't give up. Keep going, and you will get better. I have never seen anyone who doesn't get better. So keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't
If
that
you
you? Do you experience that too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's definitely a message that's always shared on the podcast by my guests.
Yeah.
So I think just keep going, and yeah, if you're doing the work, I mean, things will get better.
Yeah, you do need to do the work, unfortunately, and it's uncomfortable, but don't let that um stop you.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, well, this has been great, and just thank you again
Thank
for coming
you.
on here.
Thank you.
And definitely want to encourage anyone listening, who's resonated with this, to check out your book. And where can they find that? I know it's on Amazon.
It's on
Best place to get.
Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. It's also for people who are in the Bay Area. It's a book passage, like anywhere you can really order it. It's published by New Harbinger. Mhm.
Awesome. Yeah. So right there.
Yeah, you can
And
go on New Harbinger side too.
sounds good. But yeah, there's lots of great information in there, and it's really you break it down in a way that's easy to understand, and you walk people through various exercises they can do to get in touch with their nervous system and start doing things to calm that down and move beyond the trauma, which is great.
Yeah, it's
So
step by step. So whatever I said today is here in like over 200 pages. So it takes you um, in a slower pace, and so that you can understand what's going on and you don't feel crazy anymore.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And your website is drbabbel.com,
That's
right?
right.
And
Yes.
they can find out everything on there. I think you have the course listed on there as well, right?
Yes, I will, because it's not published yet. They are still working on the right title for some reason, but I will put it on there as soon as they have the title. But it should come, should be there very soon.
All
There's
right,
also
sounds
a
good.
blog on my website because it's on Psychology Today, so you will be linked there. And there are right now 39 articles that you can read about trauma. It's categorized under trauma types and tools and impact of trauma. So yeah, go there. There are lots of resources on my site as well, and lots of people write under my article, so it can be resource for a lot of people reading the articles because they leave feedback what it's been like for them or what they did, and so I always like that. So just know that if you read the article underneath that, you find a lot of people who share there, and that can help too. It's almost like a discussion group or a support group sometimes, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions, but if anybody has any, feel free to pop that in there in the next minute or so. Um, but yes, this has been great. So just thank you again for coming on, and I'll put the link to your website in the comments so people can find that easily.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
awesome. All right. Well, yeah, I don't think we're getting any questions here right now. So
Yeah, people probably need to digest it. And then
yeah,
just know if you do have questions, it probably is answered in the book. And it's not that expensive, I think. So it's like, like $16 or sometimes less,
yeah, I think yeah, 13, 14.
or 14.
It's available on Kindle as well. So
Oh yeah, it's on Kindle. It's gonna come out on audio, so I'm so excited too.
oh, nice.
Not out yet on audio, but New Harbinger just told me that they're working on it and should come out soon.
Excellent. I know some people prefer to listen to books, so that's good.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Well, thank you again,
Yeah, thank
Dr. Babbel.
you for the
It's been
interview.
great.
Stay in
So,
touch.
all righty.
Okay.
Well, you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you
I'll talk to
too.
you soon.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.